Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Good Night for a Murder, a Victorian true crime podcast. My name is Kim, and on this Valentine's Day Eve, I have, what else, but the story of a scandalous Victorian-era love triangle that ends in murder. What makes this story even more outrageous, though, was how investigative journalism left police running to catch up. This is the case of William Guldensuppe, the Scattered Dutchman. But first, a Victorian Society tip. It's become kind of a tradition on A Good Night for a Murder that when Valentine's Day rolls around, we celebrate by reading lonely heart ads. Also called matrimonial advertisements, these types of personal ads rose to popularity primarily amongst the working to lower middle class during the 1840s and 1850s. They originated in the notices to correspondence section of periodicals, which were dedicated to responding to all sorts of inquiries from readers. They range from asking for medical advice to homemaking advice to how to handle relationship problems. By and by, readers started submitting short profiles about themselves, along with what they desired in a spouse, and asked editors to print it in hopes it could be matched with another reader. This type of posting quickly dominated the notices to correspondence section, and they were all anyone wanted to read about. The practice was popularized by the London Journal to the point where the editor, for whatever reason, decided he would no longer run the ads, and he was forced to resign after the publication's circulation tanked. And I agree, it was a bad choice to remove them. Obviously, we're still entertained by them today. So I'm going to go ahead and read you a few, and you can decide which eligible bachelor, or in this first case, bachelorette, you'd choose. These first few were from women seeking a husband. The first reads, "A young person of noble birth, highly esteemed by all who know her, beautiful as Helena, a housewife like Penelope, thrifty as Marianne de Brandenburg, witty as Madame de Stael, a songstress like Jenny Lind, as accomplished as dancer as Corito, a rival of Rose Kastner on the piano, of Milanola on the violin, of Bertrand on the harp, with the talent of the Princess Moira de New Orleans as a sculptress, whose virtues are as austere as Lucretia's, and possessing a large fortune, seeks, through the medium of the press, a husband, being entirely without acquaintances to the masculine sex, who can properly appreciate her worth." Wow, girl, why aren't you married already? A little suspicious, but we'll move on. This next one is a much different vibe. A very handsome lady, accomplished and highly educated, wants to form the acquaintance of a refined gentleman in view of matrimony. Of household furniture, she is already in possession of a pewter plate, silver pitcher, rocking chair, bureau, double bed, looking glass, watch, thimble, and stove. Why was she including an inventory list? I can't pretend I understand that one, but this last one is much more direct. It reads, "Brunette lady, 38, desires here from a good-natured gentleman owning an automobile. Object matrimony." That's right, we don't want no scrubs. If you were looking for a wife around the turn of the century, leave me a comment and let me know which lady you'd be writing back to. Let's move on now to ads placed by men seeking a wife. A business gentleman, true American, industrious and of ambition, age 47, height 5'9½", weight 150 pounds, Christian, believes in God, of good health and clean habits, lover of home, good character, business, and college education, of some means and refinement, desires to meet a single or widow lady of some means and refinement, and Christian, age 33 to 43, weight 125 to 145 pounds, height 5'4" to 5'7", stylish and of neat appearance but plain, loves music and can play a little, who knows something about the essentials of homemaking, enough for two, to whom has the experience in business routine, stenographer, typist, and bookkeeper, good penmanship, general insurance, and brokerage business preferred, to form a home in near future where happiness and love is bound to reign. Object matrimony, triflers ignored. Why did this devolve into a job description? I would pass this one over, but let's see what else we've got. The next ad reads, "I am 27, employed by the government, have small but reasonable salary, will make some poor working girl from 18 to 25 a good husband and a happy home. Must be Protestant, no dancers, flirts, or streetwalkers need answer, object matrimony. Sir, the dancers, flirts, and streetwalkers are making their own money. Trust me, they aren't going to bother you. Let's read one more. Matrimony. A private gentleman, age 24, entirely independent, whose disposition is not to be exceeded, has lately lost the chief of his family by the hand of Providence, which has occasioned discord among the remainder, under circumstances most disagreeable to relate. To any female of respectability who would study for domestic comfort and willing to confide her future happiness in one every way qualified to render the marriage state desirable, as the advertiser is in affluence, the lady must have the power of some property which may remain in her own possession. Many very happy marriages have taken place through means similar to this now resorted to, and it is hoped no one will answer this through impotent curiosity, but should meet the eye of any agreeable lady who feels desirous of meeting with a sociable, tender, kind, and sympathizing companion, they will find this advertisement worthy of notice. Honor and secrecy may be relied on. As some little security against all applications, it is requested that letters may be addressed, post-paid, to the care of Mr. Foster, station number 68, Leadenhall Street, which will meet with the most respectful attention. I feel like that last one said a whole lot without saying anything, but it was very well written. So, it is time to vote. Leave me a comment and let me know who you think would make the best husband. I have to tell you, though, if you picked Bachelor number 3, that is the personal ad placed by William Corder in 1827 after he got a local girl pregnant, told her family he was taking her away to marry her, and instead murdered her and buried her in a grain bin in the barn. The story is called The Red Barn Murder, and I covered it back in season 2. Yeah. So if you did choose Bachelor number 3, don't be too hard on yourself. He had over 200 responses to that ad. Interesting that nearly 200 years later, we're all just out here still ignoring red flags. Be safe out there, and happy Valentine's Day, everyone. A Good Night for a Murder is a true crime podcast that does cover stories including death, violence, sexual assault, and other adult themes. Please take care while listening. On June 26, 1897, a couple of boys looking to escape the summer heat in New York City were messing around off of the East 11th Street docks of the East River. They spotted some sort of wrapped package floating in the water, and their first thought was treasure. The boys retrieved the mysterious package that was wrapped in some red and gold floral patterned oilcloth, but were horrified to discover that when unwrapped, it contained the headless torso of a dead man. They immediately reported this to police, who dismissed it as some sort of prank carried out by medical students. They thought the body seemed to have been rather cleanly severed above the diaphragm. But when medical professionals commented, they said otherwise. They said the dismemberment lacked the skill of a medical professional and appeared to have been done with a hacksaw. Now police thought, could it be murder? Their fears were confirmed the next day when the lower half of the body, minus the legs, was found by a man picking berries with his sons in the woods near 176th Street and Undercliff Avenue, just 8 miles from where the torso had been fished out of the river. Shortly afterward, 2 legs wrapped in canvas were found by boys swimming near the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The body's head never turned up, though. Also missing was a 4-inch square patch of skin that had been cut from the chest of what had been a rather powerfully built man. While shocking, this case might not have become as sensationalized as it was if it had not broke during the peak rivalry between 2 major New York newspapers, William Randolph Hearst's New York Evening Journal and Joseph Pulitzer's The New York World. Hearst inherited his fortune from his father, who was a gold miner. With it, he took on reviving the ailing New York Evening Journal as his pet project, and this kicked off what we now refer to as the era of yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is characterized by the use of outrageous, clickbait-type headlines to increase sales. Reporters would scheme, lie, and steal for scraps of stories that they'd exaggerate into full articles. Hearst's coverage of the Spanish-American War in this style increased sales so much that other papers, including Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, had no choice but to adopt the same tactics in order to compete. Before the rise of the evening journal, the World had been New York's predominant paper. And it was the coverage of this case that became known as the scattered Dutchman that caused full-blown war to break out between the two papers. Right away, Hearst hired grapplers to drag the East River in search of the body's missing head. They unabashedly splashed photos across their front page of the role they were playing in solving the case. Pulitzer clapped back by offering $500, which would be about $20,000 in today's money, to anyone who could solve the mystery of the murdered man. Hearst responded by doubling the reward money. One reporter for The World noticed that while the torso was very muscular, the hands were not rough like a laborer's hands. They were smooth. He wondered what a man who had smooth hands and a stout, strong build might do for a living. And he landed upon the men he'd seen working at the Turkish bathhouses, specifically the men they called masseurs or rubbers. Turkish baths were kind of a trend among the elite in the Victorian era. They were modeled after the Russian and Turkish bath vapor houses, where mostly men would sit in a hot, dry room to induce a cleansing sweat, then enter a pool, after which they would receive a massage and end with a cold shower. The World reporter started visiting the bathhouses to ask if any of them had any staff go missing recently. He learned that the lavish Murray Hill bath on West 42nd Street between Broadway and 6th Avenue had, in fact, had an employee go missing, a masseur or rubber named William Guldensuppe. The World reporter poked around a bit more and learned Guldensuppe was living in a small rooming house on 9th Ave near 34th Street. The rooming house was managed by a Danish 36-year-old mother of 7 named Augusta Knack, who served the local German community as a midwife. The World reporter disguised himself as a soap salesman in order to gain entry into Knack's apartment, where he stole a photo of Guldensuppe. The World, however, made a mistake. They decided to bury the story on the second page. When Hearst saw the story, he jumped on his bicycle and pedaled as fast as he could to Knack's rooming house, where he rented the entire building. This locked down the building and the occupants therein from any other reporters who might come around. Though the World hadn't taken the lead so seriously, it turns out it was a good lead. A short while later, an attendant who worked with Guldensuppe at the Murray Hill Baths came forward to identify the body. He was able to identify it by a mark on the torso and confirmed that the missing patch of skin had been a tattoo of one of Guldensupp's ex-sweethearts. Eventually, a doctor who had treated an abscess on Guldensupp's finger also identified him via the scar it left. Hearst had developed a technique that he called deploying wrecking crews. He would pay reporters, artists, and locals to interview and keep tabs on anyone and anything happening in the area and report directly back to him. This way, he was supplied with a constant stream of information that could be spread over multiple stories. And this is exactly what Hearst did in the Guldensuppe case. Eventually, it began to come out that at first, Guldensuppe had rented a room as a tenant from Knack, but they began having an affair. When Knack's husband moved out over the affair some 16 months ago, Guldensuppe moved in with Mrs. Knack. In the vacant space that had been occupied by Guldensuppe, Knack took on a new tenant who was a barber named Martin Thorne. By and by, Knack and this new tenant, Thorne, began having an affair as well. Guldensuppe actually caught them several times in the bed he shared with Knack. In one case, Guldensuppe beat Thorne so badly over it that Thorne was fired over showing up to work with 2 black eyes. What's more, another bartender who knew Thorne said Thorne had once told him he'd taken a surgery course back in Germany. There was a point of time where the barber and the surgeon were kind of one and the same. The barber surgeon would commonly care for injured soldiers, doing not only things like haircuts and shaves, but anything else one might commonly wield a razor for. They would drain and clean wounds, remove teeth, practice bloodletting, and amputate fingers, toes, or even entire limbs. By this point in history, the professions had pretty fully diverged, But in rural areas in some countries, one can still find the barber surgeon at work. All this to say, Martin Thorne seems like he may know a thing or two about how to dismember a man. Meanwhile, there was actually an official police investigation going on, and they suspected the key to the case would be finding wherever sold that distinct oilcloth that the body had been wrapped in. Reporters had the same intuition, and eventually, both the press and police alighted on a store called Riggers in Long Island City that sold an exact match for the oilcloth. The owner's wife said she had indeed sold the cloth to a woman matching Knack's description. Hearst flooded the area with reporters questioning anyone and everyone they could find about this woman who was presumed to be Augusta Knack. They followed a trail of breadcrumbs to a farm in Woodside, Queens, where they learned a couple had recently rented a cottage on the property. The couple matched the description of Augusta Knack and Martin Thorne, but the farmer called them Mr. and Mrs. Braun. He said they didn't seem to be living there, though. So far as he knew, he'd only seen them come and go a few times. Even more peculiar, though, is that he'd recently noticed some ducks on his property with a pink tinge to their feathers. The poor ducks were stained pink from swimming in the water in a drainage ditch that appeared to be running red for some reason. The red runoff was coming from the cottage he'd rented to the Brauns. Is it starting to add up yet? Detectives disassembled the plumbing inside the house, and inside the pipes, they found kind of a bloody sludge. This was their crime scene. The next day, Hearst took full credit for solving the case under the headline Murder Mystery Solved by the Journal, and awarded the $1,000 reward they put up to one of their reporters. Police still had a case to build, though. When they went to bring in Augusta Knack, they found her with her travel trunk packed, $340 recently withdrawn and stashed in her corset, and evidence that she'd been inquiring about steamship passage to Europe. Not a good look, Mrs. Knack. When they asked her where William Guldensuppe was, she said she neither knew nor cared. He had abandoned her, and she was unable to make her way in New York alone, which is why it appeared she was making plans to leave. Other than that, her lips remained sealed. Police were at a bit of an impasse as Knack was not speaking and they couldn't find Thorne. Finally, a barber colleague of Thorne's, John Gotha, informed police that Thorne was in hiding, but he had seen him recently where Thorne had confessed to the murder of Guldensuppe. This is what Gotha said Thorne related to him. I roomed in Mrs. Knack's house, and when Guldensuppe was absent, she made love to me. One night, Guldensuppe came home and found me in her room. We had a fight, and I was so badly punished I had to go to the hospital. I then moved to 3rd Avenue and 21st Street, where Mrs. Knack used to visit me clandestinely. She often gave me money and expressed a desire to leave Guldensuppe and live with me. On June 22nd, I saw an advertisement in the paper announcing that a cottage was for rent at 346 2nd Street, Woodside, Long Island. So Mrs. Knack and I inspected it on June 24th, and after deciding to rent it, we paid $15 down to a Mr. and Mrs. Braun. I was determined to get even with Guldensuppe, and I purchased a pisto and stiletto for that purpose. The next day, June 25th, Mrs. Knack persuaded Guldensuppe to look at the new house, and when he entered the building, I was hid behind the door. At the first opportunity, I shot him in the back of the head. We then threw him in the bathtub, and while he was breathing heavily, I cut off his head with a razor and stripped his body. Then I went to the store and purchased some plaster of Paris, and Mrs. Knack went to another store and purchased some red oilcloth. The head was covered in plaster of Paris and bandages and thrown in the river, and the other parts of the body were deposited in the places where they were subsequently found. Police asked Gotha for help in meeting up with Thorne again, which he did, and when Thorne arrived, he was quickly arrested. Like Knack, Thorne remained tight-lipped as well. But eventually, Augusta Knack started talking. She said it was true that she'd been sleeping with Thorne and that Guldensuppe had caught them a few times and had beat the smaller man pretty badly more than once. She went on that Guldensuppe had an active life of intrigue with many women, while she was expected to remain faithful to him, which she did not find fair. So she hatched a scheme with Thorne to get rid of Guldensuppe, and they rented the cottage that would become the crime scene. Guldensuppe had spoken to Knack before about embarking on some sort of get-rich-quick scheme, like setting up an orphanage. Knack told him she found a place, meaning the cottage, and when she brought Guldensuppe there to look at it, Thorn was lying in wait within. This was when Thorn sprung out and shot Guldensuppe in the head. The rest of it went pretty much how Thorn's friend had related to police. They dismembered the body, wrapped their head in plaster of Paris, and the rest in red oilcloth. From there, they boarded the ferry with the wrapped body parts and intended to drop them off the boat. The head sunk, but the torso floated away. Horrified and panic-stricken, they dumped the rest of the body parts in separate locations, whereabouts they were eventually found. Then they split up with plans to meet back up in Germany. Once Thorn heard Knack had broken ranks with him, he admitted that he did help dispose of the body, but stated that he did not kill Guldensuppe. When he arrived at the cottage, Knack was there with Guldensuppe, and she had already killed him. When police searched the $3 a week room he'd been hiding out in, they found a suitcase filled with newspaper clippings about the crime. On July 2, 1897, Augusta Knack was charged with the murder of William Guldensuppe, and the same charge for Martin Thorn was quick to follow. The trials pitted Knack and Thorn against each other. Thorn was represented by the infamous William F. Howe, who had defended over 600 murder and manslaughter cases. There were thousands of ticket requests to view the proceedings. Extra benches were brought in to accommodate 72 reporters, and an extra room was dedicated to 10 telegraph lines, as well as a fleet of carrier pigeons to deliver courtroom sketches. While Knack and Thorn awaited trial, the body of Guldensuppe was exhibited in an open casket where over 10,000 people filed past to view the body. A 126-page book titled The Guldensuppe Mystery was rushed to print to satisfy a curious public, and a recreation of the crime scene was added to the Eden Museum waxworks. That 4th of July, rumors of a $1,000 bounty to whoever could find Guldensupp's head brought over 1,000 children to the Woodside community, stomping through the high grass in search of a severed head. In jail, Augusta Knack started charging 25 cents admission to gawkers visiting her cell. Thorn's attorneys spun the case to say that Augusta Knack's midwifery work was a cover for providing illegal abortions, and that after Guldensuppe caught her with Thorn, he threatened to expose her, which gave Knack, and Knack alone, motive. Thorn was just her fall guy. But in the end, both of them were found guilty. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, which upheld the lower court's ruling. Thorn was sentenced to death on December 1, 1897. The sentence was carried out by electric chair in August of 1898 at Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York. Knack, however, was sentenced to just 15 years in prison, though she would wind up serving only 9. Most detectives agreed she was equally, if not more guilty than Knack, but her willingness to cooperate in the end resulted in a lighter sentence. After her release, she was received at Grand Central Station by a small crowd where she professed her love for Guldensuppe and announced her willingness to be interviewed for a fee. No reporters took her up on her offer, and she eventually slipped back into obscurity. William Guldensuppe's head was never found. So, dear listeners, I am curious to hear what you think of this case. Who do you think was guilty? Was it Augusta Knack? Was it her lover Martin? Were their sentences just? What do you think about the extent the press went to? If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment on the episode there, or if you head over to Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at A Good Night for a Murder, you can let me know what you think there as well. I've also posted some photos of those involved in the love triangle. You can also see the photos and source links for this episode on the episode blog on my website at agoodnightforamurder.com. The bonus content for Patreon members for this episode is another story of a famous fatal love triangle. Listen through the outro music to hear a short preview of this Patreon bonus content. To subscribe to Patreon and learn more about the podcast, you can visit agoodnightforamurder.com. Also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at A Good Night for a Murder. Please rate and review and share with friends. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. to accompany episode 52, Fatal Love Triangle, The Scattered Dutchman, I'm going to tell you about a second historic love triangle that ended in murder. In 1763, 45-year-old John Montague, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, was 30 years deep into a military and political career where he'd held offices including Postmaster General, First Lord of the Admiralty, and Secretary of State for the Northern Department. Yes, he became an earl at the age of 10, and yes, again, he did somewhat invent the sandwich, being 2 pieces of bread with meats and cheese in between, as a quick and simple meal for when he worked late. Sandwich is a town, by the way, in Kent, England. Anyway, he married Dorothy Fane, and in 1744, the couple welcomed a son, John, who will go on to become the 5th Earl of Sandwich. The couple would have 3 more children in 1745, 1748, and 1752. 2 of them would die in childhood, though, leaving them with 2 surviving sons in 1763. By this time, his wife Dorothy's mental health was not good. The couple remained married but separated, with Dorothy going to live in an apartment in Windsor Castle with her older sister Elizabeth. During his wife's decline, Sandwich started an affair with a singer named Martha Ray. Martha was 17 when she met the 45-year-old Earl of Sandwich, and prior to that, she worked as an apprentice milliner, which is a hat maker. After catching the attention of the Earl, though, she became his mistress, embarked on a moderately successful singing career, and completed her education at his expense. Over the next 16 years, she would also give birth to 9 of his children, 5 of whom survived. This, however, is not the love triangle we're here to talk about, though. On April 7th, 1779, 4 years into the American Revolution, the Earl, who was at this point the head of the British Royal Navy, was working late into the evening in Whitehall, London, discussing what was to be done about the 13 U.S. colonies wilding out across the pond. Across town at the Covent Garden Theater, patrons were pouring through the lobby into the hall for a benefit performance of the popular comic opera Love in a Village. The Earl had hoped to attend himself, but his work kept him away. In attendance, though, was his mistress, Miss Martha Ray, with her friend, Italian singer Caterina Galli. The ladies took their seats close to the royal box, which were some of the best seats in the house. They offered one of the best views of the stage and also allowed all of those in the theater below them to see who was seated in the box. Throughout the performance, which lasted upwards of 5 hours, ladies and gentlemen alike would visit the box to socialize and flirt with the women. At about 11:15, Martha and Caterina exited the theater amidst a large crowd and began trying to make their way towards their waiting carriage. But the crowd was too dense and they were having trouble getting through. A young man named John McNamara saw the women becoming overwhelmed and offered his arm to help guide the women to their carriage, which they accepted. Caterina stepped into the carriage first, and as Martha placed her foot on the carriage step, a man emerged from the crowd and took Martha by her sleeve. Startled, she turned to face him, and before she could even utter a word, the man clapped one pistol to her forehead and another to his temple and fired them both. Martha, still holding onto McNamara's hand, was killed instantly. The shooter, though, did not die. The bullet only grazed him, so while he was bleeding from the head,